Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is our weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's hopping in the news around automation and AI. Michael, let's get right into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
The first article is from MSN.com, and it's titled, "Company that sacked 700 workers with AI now regrets it. Scrambles to rehire as automation goes horribly wrong." So, Michael, this is talking about the company Klarna, which is a Swedish fintech company popular for its buy now, pay later service. And 3 years ago, they took the bold move of displacing about 700 employees. And at the time, their CEO was very upfront about, hey, this is because of automation and AI. I don't need these 700 employees. We're embracing the new era, and we're going to go forward. So apparently, didn't go so well. So, Michael, tell us what happened here.
Yeah, so the like you mentioned, the CEO decided it would be a great idea to reduce their costs and be able to, he would think at the time, he'd be able to increase his customer success and customer service rates by allowing AI to be able to interact with their customers. So based on that, the writing was on the wall. Let's just do it all with AI and automation. We don't need people to be able to do this kind of stuff. What we found, and this is pretty consistent about what we've seen too, is that people still like to talk to people. It's just kind of funny that way. But most of the time, when you think about any kind of the interactive voice response or IVR systems where you call into somewhere, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I know quite a few people just start shouting representative as soon as they get onto it because they don't want to talk with an automated system. Even if that automated system can give them the answer that they need, they want to skip it altogether and talk with a person to be able to do that, which I think is kind of interesting. So this article is basically another one of those kind of things where, like, hey, listen, instead of just automating and put an IVR system in, we're going to get AI and the chatbots to be able to do all the same kind of things and allow them to support 100% or 100%, as much as 100% they could, all the inbound inquiries. And what they found is that, he says in the article, he admitted that we went too far. There were a lot of complex situations where the chatbots couldn't answer the question. And it also gave some negative feedback from their customers who were interacting with these chatbots in a way that they thought, well, it's one thing to say I'm going to be doing some automation internally. It's the other thing to go out to the market and say, hey, everybody, I'm firing 700 people. Still do business with me. Everything's good. That also leaves a bad taste in people's mouths as people interact with companies who don't care for their employees. So I think this is a lesson for folks now. As you are adopting AI, first of all, make sure it works the way you expect it to before you get rid of your staff. And second of all, people still like to interact with people, and showing the public that you are valuing employees, I think, is still way more important than to say, hey, we saved 3 cents per interaction on these kind of things. So,
yeah, they clearly did not spend enough time thinking about where the human aspect is really essential in their business.
Exactly.
And in customer service, I mean, that's a prime example of where there are some things you can automate and you can let AI workers or digital workers interact with people, but you've got to have that ability to, interject with a human where you need some empathy, some discretion, some deeper understanding of what's going on with the customer and their situation. And these guys didn't do that. They just made a wholesale change and expected that everything could continue on, business as usual. And,
Yep.
They clearly suffered the consequences of that, and they learned a good lesson. So yeah, it's a good example for others, just to be a little bit more paced at how much you replace certain human components with machines. And if you do it too quickly without really thinking it through, it can be painful for your
serious
business.
backlash from the market. Exactly.
Our next article is from Ars Technica, and it's titled "OpenAI Slams Court Order to Save All ChatGPT Logs, Including Deleted Chats." So this story relates to the New York Times, who is currently involved in a lawsuit against OpenAI related to the claim that users on ChatGPT are prompting the model to generate copyrighted news articles. So if you don't subscribe to the New York Times, the thought here is that you would go to ChatGPT and you would convince the model to share that with you, even though you don't have a subscription. So this is a pretty ugly lawsuit, and it's been going on for a while. And the process of really exploring on both sides the evidence to support it and what have you has led to a pretty significant policy change on the part of OpenAI. So why don't you tell us about it, Michael?
Yeah. So according to the article, and just there's kind of knowledge we had, so before this court order was put in place, that OpenAI only retained the chat history for folks on the GPT free, their free version, Plus and Pro, who did not opt out of their data retention. So if someone said, "Hey, listen, I want you to keep my history because I want to be able to have the model interact with me in a more personal way, and if it knows my history, it can do that much more quickly and easily with me." And some people choose to keep that kind of history on, while others say, I'm asking some questions about finances, or I'm asking some personal questions about mental health and that sort of thing. And they said, "I don't want my data stored there, so I don't want you to retain it." Well, now they're required to retain all history. So even if you say, "Please don't remember my history," it will still have to keep the data that you've put into the system and the responses that were replied back to. So this could be very challenging, because I understand it from a court order perspective, because they don't necessarily know. There's a lot of discovery involved in this stuff. But it's also a big challenge on the other side of the data privacy laws. So I don't know how this is going to fall, because the discovery could inadvertently go into additional discovery, which is outside the scope of this lawsuit, simply because they're keeping all the data. And unfortunately, of course, the lawsuit doesn't go into any very specific types of how they're going to do discovery and whatnot. But this is yet another reason why organizations, especially public companies, leveraging any kind of public model, really need to be concerned about how their data could be leaked, or in this case here, stored by court order. It has absolutely nothing to do with your organization, and that data could then become available due to some of these discovery things. Now, does an average person have a lot to be concerned about? I'm thinking not. But the reality is, if I said, "Hey, I don't want you to remember anything," and now they're forced to remember everything, I'm going to second guess what I interact with ChatGPT about, because I'm now for sure I know they are storing all the data that I'm asking it, and the responses that I'm getting back. So I may think twice on what I ask ChatGPT and how I interact with that particular model, because it is public.
It just continues to build the rationale for governance, right? Companies have got to know what their employees are doing.
Exactly.
And what I found interesting too was the article said that OpenAI is not even sure they can meet the strict data policy of the European Union as a result of this, because their policy, their AI regulations say you have to give users the ability to be forgotten. Their data has to be, disposed of. And in this case, they can't do it. They have to retain it, by virtue of this lawsuit and this ruling. So I would imagine the other big tech LLM providers are all watching this case very closely.
Very closely.
It's undoubtedly going to impact them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it screams governance. It screams, AI policy for companies. And it also, as you said, we all as individuals have to be more careful and think about what we're doing when we're prompting models off the cuff and putting in not sensitive information, but just anything that we don't want to be attached to us. It's going to be out there in perpetuity, at least for the time being.
Yep, exactly.
All right, let's go to the next one. This is from Laptop Magazine. Michael, you're a lifetime subscriber to that, right?
Of course, I make sure I get that in paper form as well.
Meta's new smart glasses may include an AI feature that's already raising eyebrows over privacy concerns. Well, Meta has definitely been dominating the smart glasses market with their Ray-Ban glasses. They've sold more than 2 million pairs since they launched it 2 years ago. And they're about to release their new Meta Ray-Ban glasses Gen 3. And it's rumored to have a new feature that is quite a hot button. What is that, Michael?
Windshield wipers. Just as you might expect, these organizations are continuing to put more and more AI into their technology. And one of the things they're adding to this one here is a facial recognition technology, which is quite interesting because I had seen, and this article references a couple Harvard students who took these out and they did a video of them using them in public. And in a very short period of time, they were able to ask random people off the street information about, hey, can you tell me where the bus station is? And while they were looking at them, it did a search in the background, pulled up information, and they were able to say, hey, aren't you Marianne? We used to work down at the bus station, right? Yeah. And because it pulled all this information up in real time to be able to offer this up. Now, this could be very interesting from a networking perspective. If you go to a networking event and you say, hey, John Smith, it's very nice to see you again. Are you still working at XYZ Corporation? Blah, blah, blah. It could be interesting to kind of have that kind of effect. But I suspect most people, including myself, because I guess I'm a little more of a privacy buff here, I prefer to have my information stay more private than not. So I would be kind of freaked out if somebody came up to me on the street and says, hey, I recognize you, and here's the last 12 places you worked at, because I'm scrolling through my eyewear here, and I can see everything you've done in the past 10 years. Yeah. And that's kind of creepy in my perspective.
Yeah. Well, Zuckerberg is clearly playing offense with these glasses.
Oh, absolutely. He wears them in all of his interviews. If you look at him, any of his interviews he's done, he's got them on.
He's got them on. And I think he's the only, Meta is the only one of the big five, tech companies that is really promoting this heavily. And I'll read a quote from him. He says that these enable you to let AI see what you see, hear what you hear, and talk to you throughout the day. And they let you blend the physical and digital worlds together with holograms. Well, I have to admit, I have trouble remembering people's names, especially people I just met. And this could really be helpful to me.
True.
If I had these glasses on, I would remember everybody's names, or I'd be prompted to remember them. So there is an element of this that I find pretty interesting. But it's neat to see how Meta is going so hard down this path, and with Zuckerberg feeling like glasses are the ideal form factor for AI. This we'll see if this strategy works out for him and really differentiates and gives Meta an edge.
What's interesting to me,
I know they're hoping to get.
What's interesting to me too is actually the price point. So if you, I know you've got probably a whole collection of Ray-Bans in your suite there. But you go out and buy Ray-Bans, they're $150, $180 or whatever, depending on what style you get. And these Ray-Bans that have all this built-in tech are still in the $250 to $300 range. So it's not that much more expensive to buy this fully tech optimized version of a Ray-Ban, which is interesting to me that they've been able to squeeze that all in and still have a licensed Ray-Ban product, which is, again, not much more expensive than their plain old sunglasses, which actually work pretty well.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, our fourth and final article of the day. This is from payments.com. It's titled AI Startups, Music Labels Push for Licensing Deals with Suno and Udio. So, Michael, I know you are very keen on articles about IP protection in the era of AI. So this one's for you. Suno and Udio are two startups that essentially use AI to create remixes. So if you want,
they can create brand new songs,
but also remixes. I think the remix is the point of controversy here, because you could say, I want a song that blends Taylor Swift and AC/DC, two different songs, blend them together, and theoretically it can do it for you. So the major record labels are scrambling to figure out how they can protect the artist IP and also maybe get some compensation out of this. So why don't you tell us about it, Michael?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting thing. I actually do use Suno quite a bit to create new music, but I understand the back end of this here is all, I can't say all, I don't know anything about their back end, but it's likely trained on a lot of commercially available songs. And the challenge you have with any kind of IP like this, especially when it comes to songs, is that there's so many parties involved. For example, if we just take a very straightforward, simple engine, if you wrote a book, Brad, and you released the book on your own, self-published, no publisher involved, there'd be one person that a company like Udio or any of these startups would have to negotiate with for your intellectual property. When you create a song, and especially when you release it through a distribution platform, et cetera, now you have a lot of people that are involved. There are people who wrote the music, wrote the score, wrote the lyrics, the performers on the article, it just goes on and on. So even a single song may have, a dozen plus folks who are attached to it in some way, which now makes, any kind of interaction with those from a IP perspective very difficult. So the way that they're approaching this, which I think makes the most sense, is to approach it from a licensing perspective. They're going to license their material. And we've seen this from magazines like The Atlantic and several others who are licensing their articles in bulk to these AI platforms with the assumption that, listen, at least we're going to get a revenue stream out of the back end of this here while they're ripping off our stuff. And so it gives them a way to say, I'm legitimate, a company say, I'm legitimately using the materials that we are training our AI on, which is a great thing. And the licensing teams who are doing this then are saying, we're happy to be able to do that because now we have yet another income stream from that licensing of those materials. So I think it's a win-win. It is very, very murky place, especially when it comes to music, but across the board here, I think this is how we're going to see all of these intellectual property disputes probably handled in a bulk way. Is to say we're just going to license the material and move on because our AI likely already has all of the material it's digested without having to start fighting through the fair use and whatnot, which is currently in the courts.
Yeah, the article also says that the music companies are expected to take an equity stake in these two companies, Suno and Udio. So if you can't beat them or prevent them from using IP in the right way, then why not just invest in them and take advantage of it?
I'm wondering how much of those are related to, let's see, perhaps Suno is going out there and say, we don't have revenue stream enough to be able to license this, but what we do have are shares of our organization that we can provide on behalf of that. So that is probably the best case scenario for the music organizations as well, because now they wouldn't want to sue someone they own for misappropriation, and they can have a little more transparency, I'm guessing, into the way things are licensed and how they're managed, and maybe even work out a standardized way of moving forward for new artists or new activities that may not even relate to those music studios or music companies who have initiated this kind of deal. It may just become the de facto standard because some of the largest players are doing it. So again, very interesting. But this is what happens when you have AI doing magical things on data without any kind of prior history of it.
Michael, can you imagine what it's like to be an IP lawyer in one of these firms that creates content? Since ChatGPT was released, I bet they've been working 16-hour days.
I'm sure they have been.
I don't see it reducing at all. I'm not really sure how they stay on top of it.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested to find out how the judges who are deciding these cases or the juries hearing them would even be able to get through some of this stuff, because it becomes pretty hairy. Like I just mentioned earlier, some of the activities related to a single song, it just becomes very, very difficult. So I really think this licensing, trajectory is probably the best way for all parties involved.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have today for the weekly Pulse Check. Remember, we publish another podcast with an incredible guest every week, so be sure and check that out. And we'll see you back here this same time next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel.